Graders, this is Mrs. Arietta making the day 2 video on how to do the work inside the packet. So the list for today is a little bit longer than the first day's list. You are required to do your 30 minutes of independent reading, and the reflection/reading log is the same thing that it was the day before. It's just write a paragraph about what you read, write a summary, description of the characters, what you personally thought about it, anything you want. Just make sure that it's a full paragraph so that we know that you actually had something that you read. The second thing that you need to read are the two other Banksy sources, source number 2 and source number 3. You're going to read and annotate those sources, and the goal is to find information to use in the essay. I'm going to do this out of order. After we read the Banksy sources, I'm actually going to have us write our thesis statement. Then we'll read the last reading passage, which is the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. Then there are 2 written responses that you need to do for the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. So right now, what I need you to do is, after this slide, you need to pause this video and go read source 2 and 3 if you have not yet done so. What you need to do while you're reading it is to have a highlighter or a pen or a pencil, and you need to highlight or underline quotes, statistics, or facts that are either surprising, like you weren't expecting that information, significant, meaning, wow, that seems really important, or relevant to the prompt. So maybe it's just something that you think will help you write an essay about the topic and seems like it probably will matter for the essay. You should underline or highlight that. Once you have read both articles, you need to use that next page to take notes on what you found in on those sheets. What did you learn? How might they be useful for your essay? What did you notice? And what are you still wondering about, even after reading those sources? All of these notes will be useful in writing your essay. It wants you to then really quickly reread the prompt before you start writing a thesis statement. So, as a reminder, the hypothetical is that you're a student, an 8th grade student in the Bakersfield City School District office, and they want you to come to a forum to give your opinion on graffiti and art. You've already done the research. You've read these 3 sources. Great. At this point, you're developing your thesis statement, as it says right down here. Develop your thesis statement, and over the next 3 days, you will draft and finalize your argumentative essay. Make sure you establish an argumentative claim and support your claim with reasons and evidence from the sources that you have read. Develop your ideas clearly and use your own words, except when quoting directly from the sources. Be sure to identify the sources by title or number when using details or facts directly from the sources. So, as your essays are getting graded, the thesis statement is a big part of organization and purpose. Without that one sentence, I might not fully understand what your topic is or what your opinion is in the case of argumentative essays. You really need to make sure the audience knows exactly how you feel about the topic. Only then can you start throwing in your evidence and your elaboration. The thesis statement is a big part of the essay writing process, and all these slides I covered in the last video. So, when writing a thesis for an argumentative article or essay, it is really important that you make your point clearly and precisely. So from reading your statement, there should be no doubt in my mind what your essay is about. Then you need to connect all of the topics. You can either list what each of your body paragraphs will cover, or you can keep your statement general enough that all of your body paragraphs more or less will fit into it. So maybe you don't have a full idea of all of the body paragraph topics yet. The first draft of your thesis statement can just be somewhat general, but still covers the main points that you know you're going to want to make later. The most important things that you need to keep in mind is that you should not write about your writing, and you do not want to focus on just one detail or example from the sources that you've read. I have actually made some examples of what that might look like, both good and bad. Now, I did not want to make thesis statements about Banksy because the goal is for you to come up with your own ideas and your own thesis statement about it. So my hypothetical prompt is that pottery is the best art form. somewhat related to your topic, but not a quite match. You can't really copy me. So I said that pottery is the most refined and elegant art form because of its anthropological impact, abundance of creative freedom, and the dexterity required to pull it off. Now, from this thesis statement, somebody who is going to read my essay now knows that I'm going to be arguing in favor of pottery being a significant art form. And they know that the three reasons I'm going to provide are anthropology, which is the study of human history. So I'll probably be looking at how pottery has been used in ancient human civilizations and how it's had a big impact on those civilizations as we look back at the Mesopotamians or Chinese cultures. The second body paragraph is probably going to be about creative freedom. So I'll probably be talking about how you get to sculpt things in pottery to any shape that you want. You can choose to paint it. You could choose not to. You could fire it in a kiln, or you could just let it air dry. There's a lot of creative freedom that goes into pottery. So now I've let all of those details that source might have included be contained into that one part of my list. And then the last reason I provided was the dexterity required to pull it off. So I probably had an article about the hand-eye coordination that goes into pottery and how you really need to be good with your hands in order to pull off a good piece of artwork with pottery. In that one sentence, you can deduce all of that information about my essay, making it a good thesis statement. A bad thesis statement might sound like this. In my essay, I am going to talk about pottery and why it is an art form, which is good, because lots of old civilizations made pottery too. It is making clay into stuff, which is hard. Now, I tried to make this bad thesis statement cover the same general information, just not as well. So let's talk about some of the mistakes that were made in that bad thesis statement. For one thing, I started out by talking about my writing. In my essay, I'm going to, nope, don't start like that. Start with the point. And the point in this one was not well done. I said pottery and why it is an art form. That's not good because I don't know, is it a good art form? Is it a bad art form? It says which is good, but how good? The best? The most refined and elegant? No, just good. That's not very clear. You want to make sure that you're saying pottery, painting, street art is an art form and it is the best art form. Make it clear at the beginning what your claim is going to be. Then I go into the reasons. I said lots of old civilizations made pottery. I kind of got stuck on one detail from the articles that talked about anthropology. Lots of old civilizations made pottery. Yeah, a lot of cultures did. But what did they use it for? How did it affect their society? I'm kind of limiting myself in what I'm allowed to talk with. By saying anthropological impact, I'm keeping it general enough that I can talk about all of the old civilizations and their uses, how they made it and why. By saying old civilizations made pottery too, I really limit my first body paragraph. Then I didn't even make this a full list. I made it a run-on sentence. And I said, it is making clay into stuff. Avoid dead words, stuff, things, bad words, and that they don't mean anything. Making clay into, I don't know, vases, bowls, sculpture. Stuff is not specific. You can be more specific. However, by saying something like the abundance of creative freedom, then that body paragraph I can go into listing what types of things pottery can be used to make. The last point was, which is hard. That is not specific enough because it's not saying that it is challenging to do because of the hand-eye coordination. That was the purpose of the dexterity required to pull it off. That's talking about how you have to be skilled with your hands in order to make pottery. Which is hard does not specify exactly what I mean by that. So as you go into writing your thesis statement, you can use these examples to try to shape what you're saying about Banksy and make sure you pick your 3 points. The next thing that the packet wants you to do is start organizing your essay. So I have actually included on this slide the stars and bars model. We used this a while ago, so I wanted to make sure you knew what you could do with it. Your parents might want to see this too as a way to help you organize your essay. So you make a T. On the top of your T chart, you should have your thesis statement. So your thesis statement will either be something along the lines of Banksy is an artist, or it might be Banksy is a criminal. Make sure you include your full thesis statement here so that the rest of your T chart has to follow it. Then those reasons that you provided are going to be the stars on the left-hand side of your T chart. Now, I have not included any here because I don't want to taint your essays. I don't want to influence what you end up writing. But you should include those 3 reasons. None of these bullet points, none of these stars should be more than like 5 words each. You should really keep it short and to the point. You're not writing the essay yet. You're just outlining the essay. So provide 3 good reasons why Banksy is either an artist or a criminal. And then you want to have a couple of bars, as we call them, or bullet points or dashes on the right side corresponding to each star. So each one of these stars here has 4 bars associated with it. That's a good starting point. I would say you should try to include 1 to 2 pieces of evidence and tell me what source that evidence came from for each star. So 2 pieces of evidence per star, ideally. You don't have to, but I would say 2 will make a strong argumentative essay. So try to do this on binder paper, or you can try to do it digitally. I just did this with a chart. That's all I did. It's a two box chart. I made the left side smaller than the right side, so you can do it by hand or you can do it digitally. But that's all I really have to help you with the argumentative essay for today. The next step is reading. So at the end of this slide, you should definitely pause this video and go read The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian if you have not yet done so. You should annotate the text as you read to make it easier to answer the questions that are going to follow. What are these questions going to be about? Well, you could flip ahead and start reading those questions early. You can always do that. We encourage it in testing usually. Read the questions first, then read the passage, and then when you read the questions again, you'll have a better idea of what you were looking for and what you ended up finding. Without reading the questions to you on this video, I'm going to tell you what things you should look for as you read it and as you're annotating it. You should look for tone, which is the feeling that the author has as they are writing it. So what is the character's feelings on what they're talking about? What is the author's feeling on what they're talking about? The author's voice. So the words that the author is choosing to use. How are they speaking? What are they saying, and how are they choosing to say it? Another word that you need to keep in mind as you read it is connotation. Are there words in particular that are loaded or have a lot of emotion attached to them? If a word strikes you as being especially positive or negative, mark it down and say what feeling is associated with that word. It can be either positive or negative. So as you go through it, look for words with a strong connotation. Lastly, look for important plot or character details. That's always an important thing you should look for when you're reading a narrative story. So with that, you should pause this video if you haven't read it yet. And now I'm going to move on to the next slide. I think this is actually one of my last slides. There's one more after this. So for the questions about the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, you should try to use the ACE strategy. If your parents don't know what ACE is, you should show them this slide. So the first sentence should answer the question clearly. Just tell me what the answer is, and you can do that by restating part of the question in your claim. I have done that on the next slide, so you can use the sentence starters that I have made in the next slide on this slideshow. After you have made that clear claim, that clear answer, you should cite specific parts of the text, either directly, like using a quote from the story, or indirectly, by paraphrasing something that happened in the story. At the end of any citation, you should try to include the author's last name, which is actually included here. The last name of the author is Alexi. And if we have the page number, we want to try to include it here, but I don't believe your packet includes page numbers, so don't worry about it. Just put Alexi. The last sentence of your ACE paragraph should explain how the quote proves your claim and elaborates on your point. Generally, you just want to tie everything together. Make it feel like one complete paragraph that was answering the questions. A good response will have 3 sentences to get your point across. I have provided for you at least 3 sentence starters for each ACE paragraph. So the first question talks about the narrator's tone. You should start your answer with, the narrator's tone in The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is, and then state the feeling. Maybe the next sentence says, the narrator's tone is or isn't surprising or unexpected, whichever word you want to choose. Pick one of those words where I've put a slash. Because, explain to me why the tone is or isn't surprising. When you're going into a citation, you need to lead into it. So you could say, one example of the narrator showing the tone is when, and then pick a moment where the feeling or tone was very obvious. Then you go into the quote or the paraphrasing. And then the last sentence for question number 1, you should say, the connotation of this passage shows, explain why the narrator chose this tone. Explain why that passage's connotation or feeling shows it. Kind of just want to tie everything you've said together. That's really the goal of the last sentence. The second sentence is about the coping mechanisms of Junior. So the first sentence should restate the question and start out with something like, in order to cope with his situation, Junior, what does he do? Answer that question, fill it in. For your citation, you'll need to say something like, an example of this coping was when, and you can either quote or paraphrase a specific moment or paragraph in the story where he does this coping. And then the last sentence of your paragraph should include, Junior uses this as an escape because. Why is he doing this? Why does he choose to use this as an escape? So I hope that these sentence starters will help you answer the 2 questions on The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. Stay tuned. Tomorrow I should be posting the video for the 3rd day of the first week. I'll probably do 2 videos tomorrow for that. But good luck with the essay and answering those 2 questions, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.